Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coming in Hot with Abby Baird. My name is Abby Baird, and I'm so excited for y'all to be here today. If you are in the audience, please comment and tell us where you're from. Any questions you have, we want to get to know you today. But we are so excited that you're here. Coming in Hot is all about focusing on the next generation of supply chain, ways to get them involved, ways to share what our industry is about. And so I'm really excited today to talk about that it's never too early to introduce supply chain management to people and what are some innovative ways to do that. So, like I said, before I bring on our guest, please let us know where you're from and any questions you have. But I am so excited to introduce to the stage Megan Preston Meyer. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Abby. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here today. So, tell the audience who you are, what you're all about, how you got into supply chain. I know we have a really exciting conversation to have. So, and I know they're dying to get to know who you are. So,
Okay. So I'm Megan Preston Meyer. I worked for about 10 years in supply chain and sort of supply chain adjacent roles before quitting that world, which I loved, to become a writer. And so now I write kids' books about supply chain and operations management concepts.
that is so cool. I was like, I'm about to, I don't know, but I was like, I literally have them here. And they are fantastic. So for anyone in the audience, it's FIFO Saves the Day and Supply Chain Clears the Way. Both fantastic books, and I'm excited for us to talk more about them. And just for people to have resources, but also speak about what sparked this idea and other parts about it. So, how did you think of the idea to write supply chain management books for children specifically?
So when I started FIFO Saves the Day, which you can see on the screen there, when I first wrote that book, I was working in a job where I was in charge of demand forecasting and planning for super perishable inventory. I worked with fresh food. It's a super cool idea. I don't know if anyone's heard of, I think there's a company called Baird in the US, Farmer's Fridge, this whole concept of fresh food vending machines. And so my job was to make sure that there was enough, but not too much super fresh food in these refrigerators. And, everything at a 3-day shelf life. If someone were to go into my fridge and take the chicken saute noodles from the back that had 3 days of shelf life instead of 1 day of shelf life, it would throw off my entire projections. So I was thinking about first in, first out all the time. And then somehow this sort of morphed into a story. And that's how FIFO Saves the Day came to life.
That's so cool. I mean, I was like, AJ said it fantastic in the comments that this is the perfect Christmas present. If you're in supply chain right now and you want to gift anyone in your life, someone who doesn't know anything about supply chain or even does, these are the perfect gifts. I know I have been telling everyone to go buy them. And especially in this supply chain climate, if you follow Let's Talk Supply Chain, you saw on Friday, you order them now, y'all. But I think to your point, like you were inspired from what you saw in the actual industry and applied it to such an innovative way to share supply chain. And I think something that is so unique about supply chain management is that so many people just fall into it. But as it evolves and changes, like the people right now, I'm in school for supply chain, and not many people have that experience. And I didn't know it, and I'm sure many people have this experience of not even knowing what supply chain management is until you're either in college or you're in industry and you fall in a job that relates to supply chain. And so I think that's what your books do is just educate the next generation about supply chain management so early on, which is really cool. So how would you describe the role of education in sharing supply chain management with especially the younger generation, but everyone? Like, what's the role of education within that?
Well, I think what you said, Abby, about, you are kind of a minority if you already know that you want to go into supply chain and you're already in you're already learning about it. Because I mean, I kind of fell into it. I have an MBA in operations management. So I knew early enough that I was going to, that I wanted to learn more about the concepts behind the actual work that we do. But so many people just they get a job and then they get another job and they end up in the role learning by doing, which is also great. And I mean, I think especially with supply chain, because everything we do is so tangible, theory and education it's really, really helpful to kind of get you ready, but you can't just read in a book and then go out and succeed. I mean, you have to have your hands dirty. And I think so one of the ways that education can really help is by getting people excited about it earlier. And like you, the more people who know about it and want to go into these types of careers intentionally, right? Like they start out and instead of just thinking, I'm going to figure it out as I go, and maybe, 5 years down the road, they sort of land here in this world where they won't find out they want to be. If they were learning about it in high school, even in like elementary school, and this was an option, this was one of the, you have a career day when you're in second grade and a fireman comes in and a policeman and a doctor. If a procurement manager came in or like someone who builds warehouse management systems, that's going to open up this whole new world. Just kind of put it on the radar for people so that kids, next generation can start thinking about it even earlier.
Yeah, I love that. I do want to take a moment to say hello to our audience. We have people from all over the globe, and so I'm excited that they are here to join us. You yourself are in Switzerland, so already such a global presence. But we have people from Canada, and we have we just saw on the screen I have Bahrain. I think that's how you say it. I'm very sorry if I butchered that. And then also people from Atlanta. So I'm excited that y'all are all here. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us how you got into supply chain and how you in the audience, tell us how you kind of found out about supply chain, because this could be the future of how people find out about supply chain. So how did you find out about it? And one thing that I love about your books, Megan, is actually how the main character is a woman, like how she's a girl. And so I think not only is this fantastic that students are going to see supply chain in those formative years, but they're also going to see that it is like a girl in there making these decisions and being a problem solver and being really innovative. And I think that kind of speaks to how supply chain is still evolving and how it's becoming so much more diverse and just a fantastic industry to be in. So what value do you think the future generations and just the people who are either studying it or the people that your books are targeted at, what value do you think they will bring to the industry?
I think they're going to bring so much value. I think everyone who enters the industry is going to bring value. Like you say, there's the more women that come in, the more people from different backgrounds, no matter what you're talking about, a diverse set of ideas is going to make, any system better. And so what I would hate to have happen is for a little girl to, hear about something super cool, like hear about this job or hear about what like her dad does at work, and then think, oh, I really, really want to get into that, but oh, that's for boys, right? Like boys play with trains and trucks and ships, and girls don't. Girls like bake things in ovens. I don't know. I don't actually know what little girls do anymore. But so I think just making it so that that's not a question. I also don't want anyone to say like, I am a girl, so therefore this is one of the four, I saw a book that said this is one of the four careers that women can go into. Like, I just don't even want anyone little boys, little girls, no one should even have to think about that when they're making a choice of profession. They should figure out what they enjoy, what lights them up, what kind of problems they like to solve, and then go for it with absolutely no thought to like any artificial barriers being in the way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's such a fantastic vision that so many people want and are fighting for. And what are ways that you think that current industry leaders, whether they be in supply chain, out of supply chain, just like maybe, I don't want to say those older generations, but the people who are in the industry pouring into younger generations, what are ways that they can pour into them and instill that type of mindset? So people who are entering whatever sets their soul on fire can do that just fully confidently.
One of the biggest, the most valuable things that people can do, current industry leaders, is just make it a lot more visible. I think, like we were talking about before, every kid knows what a fireman does and what a fireman looks like, because it's very easy to illustrate a fireman in a book. So there's lots of books. And most people know what a doctor does. Most people know what a lawyer does. But I think part of the reason that supply chain is that it's not so visible is because there are thousands of roles that fall within this industry, right? You can work in a warehouse, you can work on a dock, you can work like planning last mile logistics, you can be, like you can sit and do nothing but data science to optimize routes, right? Like there's so many different things that you can do. And so because there's such a wide variety, and because let's face it, most of us wear, like a hoodie to work, especially if we're working at home, or you're wearing, like you might be wearing something kind of high vis if you're like outside, but there isn't you can't just draw a supply chain professional, right? There's not a good visible cue that says this person's in supply chain. So we need to start making that more visible. We need to be able, like a little kid should be able to say, hey, for Halloween, I want to be a procurement manager. What does that look like? We need to give them something that they can latch onto. And so when someone says, what do you want to be when you grow up? They can picture supply chain as an option, just like you can picture a doctor or a lawyer or a fireman. And so again, the more visible that we can make this stuff, the more we can get out there by going to schools, by writing books, by, when we see the Port of LA on TV and it's all backed up with ships, when we're telling our kids, like, look at this, like every time we see one of these visible indicators of what the supply chain is, we need to be pointing that out and making that very apparent and kind of lodging it in kids' brains.
I love that. And I think one thing that I really love about it is that as someone who loves supply chain, is really excited to go into industry, one of the huge struggles now is, oh, what do you want to do? I'm like, there's so many options, and it's hard to just narrow it down when everything is so exciting and you're a problem solver on the day to day. But one thing that really stood out, and why I think I really would have benefited from these books, is that as a child, like if you were to ask me what I wanted to do, I remember saying, I want to be the one who's responsible for making sure things get places at the right time. But I just had no concept of what that industry was or what that was. And at the same point, none of the adults in my life had that visibility either. They didn't understand that supply chain was a whole industry within itself, that that's a job within itself. And that's why I'm thankful for going to university where there is a supply chain based education, but also innovative solutions to a problem like this, like your book. And so that's one thing I love about the industry, is how innovative and how problem solving it is. And so you already kind of touched on it, but what is the value of innovation and problem solving within the supply chain? And do you think how that looks is going to change as supply chain continues to evolve?
I think innovation is key in any industry, and especially in the supply chain, because it's changing all the time too. And so anybody who is especially entering the industry needs to not only keep up with that rate of change, but add to it, right? Like we always want to, why come into an industry if you're not going to make it better? And so we need to be going into anything we do thinking, okay, how can I go in? How can I innovate? How can I solve these problems? And, the more problems, like we're seeing a lot of problems these days. But I think one of the really nice things about supply chain, I always found, and with operations, is that it's not just like, it is not a career you can go into and just expect to make PowerPoints for, the next 20 years. You have to, like, there is a tangible result at the end of the day. Like if your goods do not move from port to, like to the distribution center to somebody's house, you have failed, right? Like you can very clearly see that. And so there's so much room there, because you're literally like, you're going from the very beginning of a product's life cycle to the very end. There's a lot of room within that to innovate. And then it's also so fulfilling at the end of the day, because it's very, very tangible when you succeed.
Yeah, that's so cool. And if the audience has any of their own questions that they want to ask Megan, please let us know. She's a wealth of knowledge and clearly has just so much to offer. So please let us know if you have any questions, and just continue to let us know how you got into supply chain, where you're from. We really want to get to know y'all. But to continue off your point, the industry is clearly changing. And so what are some challenges that you think the younger generations will face that current industry leaders don't have to, and also vice versa?
I think one big challenge is going to be the fact that everything in the world keeps becoming more digitized, right? And especially the next generation is growing up completely online. I mean, I'm old enough that I remember doing homework with a encyclopedia that came on a CD-ROM. Like I'm pretty old, but like, so then like your generation, you already have a lot more advantage than I do, because you are like a digital native, I think. But then the kids even below you, like I think they're calling it Gen Alpha. I don't even know, like the little kids. They are, they will have never known a world without computers. And if, we're talking about the metaverse now, who knows what it's going to be like by the time they start entering the workforce. They might be going to work like as an avatar. But the problem is, I think, because the world will continue to be more digital, the things that are tactical are going to be even more, there's going to be even more of a split, right? And so supply chain you can't just digitize it. You can't have a completely virtual supply chain. Like things have to move. And so if your entire life is spent kind of online, and then you have to go to work and everything is very, very, very physical, I'm not sure, maybe the next generation might have more of a, it might be more difficult for them to integrate that. On the other hand, they might have so many more tools and so many more, innovative ways to solve problems that it will actually help them. I think we'll just have to see.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it changes, because already in the last 6 months, we've seen so much change. And especially as just these new thought leaders enter the space, we've already seen so much change. And I think a point that you bring up is really interesting, is just like access to information and to like the tools, just to have so much visibility and access within the supply chain. So we definitely have some industry leaders who are going to step in and just completely change how we view supply chain. And that is really exciting. And so kind of to that point, like, what do you think are some of almost the gaps between industry leaders and people who are just now entering the industry? What are some gaps in ways that my generation or even younger could grow in?
It's a great question. I think there is some of those gaps we might not even be able to identify yet, because like you say, things are changing so quickly. And so those gaps are going to become more and more apparent. We're going to start seeing, issues that we didn't even think about 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There's going to be a lot more, I don't know, I can see there being a lot more kind of fracturing going on, all along the supply chain, whether it's, from the consumer side for sure. We're seeing a lot more emphasis on last mile, right? People, especially during the pandemic, I don't think even afterward, people are going to realize that if you can just have everything show up at your door and you don't have to go to Costco and make a huge trip, people are going to want that convenience, which is going to have an effect on how far we have to take goods. There's going to be a lot more little splinters at the end. And then on the other hand too, I know your generation, maybe even the following generation too, is going to there's a lot more sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And so there's a lot more little startups and a lot more, people want to work for themselves. And so while we probably will still see lots of, big companies, there'll probably be a lot more partnerships, right? You're talking about, there's going to be lots of little startups that all need to somehow work together. And whether that works the same as in a bigger organization where kind of there's an overarching structure, or if there's more collaboration or more coordination that needs to occur, I think that's one thing that we might be seeing more of. And I think that'll be really interesting to see how, then communication and connectivity, there will be some digital aspects of making sure that information is exchanged and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that's going to be a cool change that we might see in the industry.
Yeah, and it's going to be exciting to watch that and hopefully be a part of it as well. Denise asked a great question, and I'd love to know what insight you have on it. What are the top tools out there, especially with everything that's going on in the supply chain? What are some top tools just to be able to see the visibility within the supply? And Denise, if you want to expand more, but just what are top tools to be able to see what's happening in the supply chain to instill change within the supply chain, especially with so much going on?
Because I'm not in the industry currently, this is not someplace that I'm super on top of. One thing that I have heard of is there's a company, I hope I get it right, called Roamby, I think. I was talking to a friend of mine who works for this company, and I think there's a lot of great tools, a lot of ways that you can get a lot more visibility, smart sensors, and then all of the, not only the sensors and the data that comes with it, but just the analytics that go in behind it and help you to optimize and make the most of your of every bit of information that you can gather. So I think that's probably one place that I would look into, is some of these smart tracking devices and all of the visibility and insight that they bring.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And then really helpful. So Denise, I found that really helpful. So I hope she did as well. And so then I also would love to know, we talked a lot about how the industry is going to change and how the new people entering industry are going to bring these new innovation and new ideas. But in your books, we see a lot of these, I don't want to say simple, but these concrete supply chain concepts that we just understand, that we just know. So do you think there are some things within the supply chain, whether that be concepts, whether that be processes, that in contrast to normally how we view supply chain, will remain the same or similar as new people enter industry?
I think so too. I think there's so much that's going to stay the same, right? Because so much supply chain, really what I love about it, with, whether it's supply chain, whether it's operations management, logistics, all of these things are so real, right? There's been so much innovation, but at the end of the day, you're moving things with, whatever type of transport from point A to point B. And I like to say that, the books in FIFO Saves the Day, like I talked about, that's first in, first out kind of inventory, stock rotation. And then supply chain clears the way. That one's talking about manufacturing bottlenecks. And so these are, there's that one too.
Big fan. I'm a big fan over here.
Yeah. That makes me it's so amazing to see them in the wild, because I've got a copy on my desk too, but that's because
that's your vision. I can imagine how surreal it would be.
It's so cool. Yeah. But I think what they are, the fact that there are these they're simple concepts. I like to say that they're common sense, but not common knowledge. Once you know them, once you can kind of articulate them, you can see them everywhere. Kids can go to the grocery store and see, the expiration dates on milk. Kids can go to, especially now with all of the supply chain bottlenecks, you can understand where if there's one little slowdown anywhere in a system, it's going to affect the entire system. And so just giving kids the words to, and a story to articulate these things that they are very able to understand. They probably already know it, like hopefully this will sound familiar and not completely brand new. And I
Mhm.
think that's really all of these little rules, these little this hidden logic that sort of makes the world go round. The more we can expose that to kids and to everybody, and start looking for these principles that make our world work, the sooner we can do that, the better.
So true. And I was like, I just think it's so creative that you explain fantastic supply chain concepts through the eyes of through the tales of a dragon food factory. Like that is just fantastic. And to your point exactly, like it's these terms and concepts that make sense, but we don't know how to articulate them. And especially you might see it happening, but even adults are like they might see it happening, but they may not be able to identify, oh, that's a supply chain concept called this. Um, and so honestly, this book is great for anyone of any ages, but it does truly a fantastic job of being able to see the whole process. To your point of, I think a huge theme that you've been speaking about our whole conversation is that we have to have this holistic approach to supply chain, because if your products from start to finish don't get there, um, you aren't succeeding. And your books do a great job of illustrating, being detail oriented, looking at the whole process, and then just these concepts of supply chain in general. So, like I said, to the audience, if you already have it in the 30-minute conversations, bought them, now is the time because they are fantastic. And in the supply chain climate right now, you don't want to miss it. But for those of you who are new to the show, or just new to following Let's Talk Supply Chain, we have a TikTok account. And so on TikTok, we highlight um, we just highlight all these different supply chain concepts. And so I'm excited to share some. We actually have one about these books, um, and about innovative ways to share the supply chain. And now what they highlight, what they cover, as you can see, the illustrations are beautiful, which are done by Anita Amersdorfer. And she did, I mean, they're beautiful. And then just where to get them as well. I'm telling you, now's the time, y'all. And then we also have another TikTok. Um, I don't think we'll be able to hear it, but I'll narrate it. It's essentially being in a supply chain class and saying, "Now my purpose has changed, and I'm going to change the world." And I think the reason I chose it is because I just think it shows the importance of a supply chain education. It's great when you fall into it, but the more knowledge and visibility you have of the supply chain, the more you're going to be inspired to step into it and make a change and make a difference within it. So if you don't already, follow our TikTok account. It's some, I know I'm biased, but some fantastic content. And then also post on TikTok with hashtag Let's Talk Supply Chain. And I would love to repost your content. But yeah, like I said, I think the power of education and the power of thinking out of the box and being a problem solver like these books is going to change how we view the supply chain and who enters it. And so I'm thankful that you are using your talents and your gifts to share supply chain. It's never too early. Never too early, y'all. So Megan, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you to Ships and Let's Talk Supply Chain for sponsoring it. But Megan, truly, it was wonderful speaking to you, and I just appreciate, and I know our audience appreciates all the insight and wisdom that you had to share. So just thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, thank you, Abby. This was so much fun. And it's always fun to talk to people who are excited about this, because let's face it, like it's a little bit niche, especially like kids' books about supply chain, but it's so much fun to find like-minded people and to be able to, share this message and, like you say, get people involved early on so they can be more intentional and just have a lot more, like more years of fun and success and making an impact.
I agree. More years of fun. That's the goal. But again, thank you for joining. An audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Feel free to please connect with both of us on LinkedIn. And if you have any more questions, just let us know. But Megan, it was a delight talking to you today, and thank you for joining.